Therapy Geeks, a podcast by Luke McGibbon and Louise Taylor.
Ever.
It's been a while.
It has.
Well, we seem to be, every month and a half seems to be?
Don't
seems
know.
to be where it settles naturally. It's the desire path. Did you ever hear desire paths?
No.
It's this great. I heard about this in there's a university in America. I can't remember. I think it's Michigan. Who cares? Why am I? But they did this thing where they just got rid of all the pavements in their university, right? And then they saw what paths formed naturally in the grass by what do people most regularly use to get from place to place, and then they put the pavements there. So the pavement structure in that place is weird because it just looks like an octopus of roads coming from the center of the grass, but it makes sense. It's where
Yes.
so they call it the desire paths where people just go naturally.
That's that's a good idea.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what's happening with our schedule for this.
Well, I think this
Month
is
and a half.
exactly as it should be.
Yeah, exactly. It's where it falls.
It flows.
It flows, exactly.
You're not forcing it.
Yeah, it's just it happens.
Yeah, we're like, this is what we might talk about in the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay, I've got a little bit of a cough.
Oh,
This is a sort of riveting dialogue the podcasters are looking for. A bit of info on my cough. For anyone listening, it is a little bit loose. Shall we give it?
well, I'm glad you actually reminded me.
Have I?
Because I've got a little bit of a cough too.
This is brilliant. This is what you wait a month and a half for.
I thought I was fine. And then you reminded me I've actually got a little bit of a cough.
It's not that loose, I suppose.
No. No, that's great.
Shall I begin with a quote? Do you mind? I'm really itching to get this week's quote off the bat.
Let's be having a quote then.
Well, here I got two quotes from a book that I read recently that I've fucking loved. Can I give you maybe the background why I read it? It's a little personal. Was a client of mine, a counselling client, passed away. Obviously I can't go into detail. And I'd literally, other than saying I'd seen them one session, and I don't know, and it was years ago, and I don't know why, but it just really took it out of me when I found out that they died, because you always feel a bit of responsibility, and so I started reading quite a lot of books about death because I sort of just wanted to. I don't know. I think it just what it brought to me was that there's an unsettlement in me when it comes to death and grief, and so there's this quote here from a book called When Breath Becomes Air, and that's a book by an author called Paul Kalanithi. I highly recommend it. It's a true story. The author's passed on himself now. It's about his journey towards accepting that he's going to pass away. He's a neurosurgeon who found out he had cancer on the spine, and was coming to terms with going from doctor to patient. And this is a quote about being a surgeon, and to me I think it's also a wider quote about trying and effort. The secret is to know that the deck is stacked, that you will lose, that your hands or judgment will slip, and yet still struggle to win for your patients. You can't ever reach perfection, but you can believe in an asymptote towards which you're ceaselessly striving.
Isn't that lovely?
It is, yeah. And I know really it's just a very complex way of saying, you're going to fail, but do try. I think, but it's quite beautiful, I thought.
Do you know, this is something, so this episode we were talking about trauma and recovery, and about talking about that. And this is something I think's come up a lot recently. So a lot of trauma would be maybe connected to death.
Yeah.
Or fear of dying.
Well, there is, what is it they call it? Complex grief?
Complex grief, complex trauma.
Yes, and they're often linked,
Yeah, and I've also been thinking about the way that my Northern Ireland particularly, so we're in Northern Ireland, don't know if we've any listeners here or not, but Northern Ireland, so I'm thinking in terms of Northern Ireland and death, and I don't think we deal with it well. Death is a part of life. It's one of the only things you can be completely sure of.
Yeah. Well, I guess part of Northern Irish culture is niceness and friendliness, isn't it? And with niceness can sometimes come just an element of denial.
Is it though niceness and friendliness, or is it a facade of trying to just keep the peace Or trying to
question.
not, because is it niceness and friendliness? Because actually we're known for not actually being that nice and friendly to each other.
That's a good point. I guess it makes you wonder. Like, sometimes I'm not actually that aware that nice is such a part of our culture, but I sometimes, you know, you get people from abroad come over, or the silly example, but there's like a vlogger who I don't even follow, but he's very popular, and called Casey Neistat, and he was here maybe 3 years ago, and I just watched the video the other day because I was keen on seeing like an outsider's perspective on Belfast, other than fucking Jon Snow calling us boring. And
What?
yeah, Kit Harington, he said it ages ago now, and the backlash is long gone, but
Oh, well,
you
no,
know,
it's just started
never
with me.
never forgotten. It lives. The grudge lives on in me.
Jon Snow said we were boring.
Well, he just said Belfast a bit boring. There's not much to do.
Well, that was a projection.
That, well, I would say so. I would also say though that a lot of people in Belfast believe the same thing, but they didn't like hearing him say it. It's kind of like when your little brother, when someone insults your little brother, you go like,
You're like, I think he's an idiot, but you're not allowed to say
yeah,
that.
yeah, he's mine. He's mine. I'm not. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
and you know, I think one of the things I noticed in that Casey Neistat video was he just kept saying everyone's so friendly and so nice, and it makes you wonder, like, what is it about our culture that enforces that? Is it conflict? Is it a reaction to conflict?
Actually, I do think the people of this country are incredible. I believe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But you cannot deny that there's been an incredible amount of trauma.
Yeah.
And it still prevails. It still continues, but a lot of the time it's happening in the homes.
Yeah.
So people often are told, like, strangers are, well, particularly in this culture, where actually you didn't know who you could talk to, you didn't know who you could trust. So
Yeah.
there was a need to keep information from other people.
I guess so. Yeah.
So, but now a lot of more of the trauma is happening in the homes, but they've also, the legacy is you can't trust people outside. So you've got trauma. But actually, I think the spirit of the country is tenacity.
Yeah.
I think the people are hilarious. Like,
Yeah. I think so too.
you know, so there's a real spirit, but you cannot deny that there has been an incredible, and it continues. It does continue, the trauma.
I do think as well that, you know, being comedians ourselves. Well,
Well,
would
I'm
you call yourself a former comedian?
I would just call myself
Louise.
Louise. But I enjoy comedy, but I don't really. I might go back though.
I find that whenever because, you know, Northern Ireland's got quite a sort of humble but growing comedy scene, and I find that when you go down south, or maybe even across the water to England, like the lower levels of the comedy scene, the open mics in England and Dublin are so much shitter than the lower levels of Belfast. So like, I feel like the worst comedians of Belfast are generally like okay down south, and maybe that's a sort of misguided patriotism, because I do love this place despite itself, but
I think that's good. I think it's good that because there's more people should be celebrating Northern Ireland and should be celebrating the arts and should be sticking up for, because like we've been such the underdogs.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess like humor does sort of come as a result to trauma. Like black humor is often a way of coping with trauma or talking about it incrementally. Freud thought that jokes were a way of making us feel okay about things we're scared of.
Yes.
And you can see that in comedy when you see how many men talk about stand-up comedians. I mean, so many jokes about sexual inferiority. And, you know, it's a fear of being sexually inferior. And so many women talking about men because men are terrifying. Like,
men are terrifying.
Well, I mean, isn't that sort of the state of society right now, that people say, you know, men are scared that women will laugh at them, women are scared that men will kill them? Isn't that the
Oh, wow.
Isn't that the same?
But these are all beliefs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, they are all... Well, I don't know. I mean...
Because do I believe men are terrifying? No, not
no.
generally, but I believe individuals can be terrifying.
Well, sure, yeah.
Whereas that's like a stereotype that possibly on the subconscious level prevails.
Yeah.
Men are dangerous in a way.
Yeah, I don't think women believe that on the whole men are evil. Which
No.
sort of, you know, makes the whole idea of the whole not all men thing seem a bit silly, because of course, you know, people know that.
But then if they laugh at those jokes, that's also telling you something that they can relate.
Well, there was actually a few studies done on this. No, there wasn't actually. No, it was something I wish there was a study done on. That's what it was. But
I remember the last episode, there was a study.
Oh God! And then I had to put out a wee correction, wasn't there?
Yeah, but that's all right.
Well, there was a study. It's just that study was subsequently like just hammered into the ground with reams of
really?
evidence against it. It was the abortion crime one. That was. I mean, because how would you correlate that anyway? Anyway, what I would like to see a study on is the effect of when someone does a gallows joke about themselves and you laugh or don't laugh. What is the effect there? Because so say I'm a client and I say something like, well, I guess I'm just not good at anything these days, eh? Or I guess I better just kill myself. The way someone says like a laugh, but there's intention there.
Yes.
And do you laugh along and potentially make it sort of legitimate, or do you not laugh and make them feel bad that you didn't laugh, like make them feel awkward?
Well, I would be like, what's that about? As in,
Yeah.
because it's like, it's a defense mechanism. Straight away, that's screaming I need comfort to me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Like comfort, reassurance, self-esteem.
Yeah.
Because the fact that you would joke,
Pardon me.
like, I don't know. It's just. It would be. It's a communicator.
I think, personally, I guess. I'm undermining myself because I made it sound rhetorical, but I'm just going to say what I do as well.
Yes.
I think there is a middle ground where you can sort of you can smile, you don't have to laugh or be totally silent, which to me is sort of going, okay, I recognize that was a joke and I'm smiling, so it's okay. I'm not going to make you feel awkward about it, but I'm not going to laugh and make it seem like...
But it depends on the relationship. Because if that was a client I knew well, I'd be like, what's that about?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You smile and then you examine because, well, maybe not examine, but I mean, in the spirit of congruence, you go well, I wonder how much of that is joke and how much of that is real, know? And maybe probe that a bit. I'm using the wrong words. Probe is very invasive.
No, but I know what I think by this stage, if anybody's listening, they know you're not a probing, interrogating kind of counselor. So you will be gentle and you will be respectful. But it's I just think the communication, the way people talk. But in terms of trauma, there's another one. You saying, maybe you should just go kill yourself. Trauma within this culture with regards to suicide, I don't even think we can begin to measure the impact that's currently having on many, many people.
We were talking a bit earlier about the work of the late Lyra McKee, who passed away this last week. And she wrote this article called "The Suicide of the Ceasefire Babies." Yeah. Actually, and this is, to me, I think is the best response to what's happened actually with regards to Lyra McKee. Somebody said, share her work. So, yeah.
Her message.
Wrote an excellent article about the rise in suicide post ceasefire, and there's that quote that's being shared about everywhere that we're meant to get the spoils of peace. They just never quite reached us. And I think that is, I mean, look at the evidence. People are killing themselves, and this is it's such a complicated thing. How do you break that down? Because I'm always yammering on about transgenerational trauma, and of course that plays a part.
Yes,
but then there's also the political hopelessness that engulfs the country, particularly at the moment. It's probably at its peak because we just don't have politics. I don't think have we ever had a government in the time that this podcast has existed?
But this is where I'm like this. I think people need to see it from a bit of a higher perspective. As in, okay, they are working. They're just not publicly working together. Now, when we're talking about trauma and traumatized people and a highly traumatized population, if the MLAs and the MPs don't get them the results they want, they're putting themselves in danger.
Yeah.
Now, the MLAs are supposed to hold the public services accountable, and the MLAs cannot hold the public services accountable because they're unaccountable. So they are working. So they will go, and if you go to them and you engage with them, they will actually try and help you. But they're not able to. But it's a lot of that is there's a bigger picture here. The public services are in a complete state, and if they get back on, the public services are just going to demand more and more and more money. So in terms of trauma, it's I love the Gordian knot. It's the country is a Gordian knot.
Yeah.
And it's about trying to help individuals on an individual level,
Yeah.
recover and heal and be empowered and help themselves, as opposed to saying, well, where are my MLAs? What are my MLAs? The MLAs can't hold the public services accountable.
Yeah.
But they can help the individuals. And I met one and I said, well, what do you see? There was one from one of the smaller parties. And I was like, how do you see your job? And I thought it was brilliant, her response. I listen to people. I was like, she's like a counsellor.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I listen to people and I try and help them in whatever way I want. But the main thing I do is I listen to people and their problems.
There's an SDLP counsellor in North Belfast who's got like such a great reputation around there. He is also a mental health nurse, to be fair, so he has the training for it. But like, and he would often recommend people on to the correct services, you know, because he's sort of aware that the NHS waiting list,
Yes,
it's hard. So he knows all the charities to push people through and stuff. And I think he's sort of got that similar idea, you know, of like so much of it is just hearing people. Like when you hear people complaining about politics, like other than the big stuff, right? The one that you can work on, that you always hear people saying, is that they only come to my door at elections, or they don't come to my door, you know, and there's a feeling of an imbalance in the relationship, because you're saying they hold the public services accountable.
Well, they can't, but they
Oh,
try.
yeah. They're meant to be.
They're supposed to be. Yes.
And then they themselves are meant to be accountable to the public, the MLAs. By way of vote. It's just that government never changes around here because of the complexities of orange and green voting, which is also fueled by trauma, paramilitaries, and all sorts of horrible nonsense. And you know, it's funny you said the Gordian knot. Do you know how, I think it was Alexander the Great? Do you know how he untied the Gordian knot?
How?
He just cut it with a sword. He didn't untie it. Couldn't be untied, so he just cut it as, you know, it's like that whole...
he cut it with a sword.
Yeah.
So it's like complete, like, new start.
Yeah.
Don't even, like, new, fresh. Let's just start again.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the hope. But I do think that there is a way of untying it by if you just wiggle the right bits enough, you know, in government and things like that. But so much of it just has to be done on an individual level, because it's like government isn't going to come through for people anytime soon. In a non-partisan way.
I believe in grassroots action.
Yeah.
I believe like in the voluntary sector. I believe and in particular, so we're talking trauma, and we're talking, like we were talking suicide, and I believe that the families and the people who've been most impacted by suicide will make the greatest impact, and are possibly the people who can make the biggest amount of change in this area, because they know what it's like. But then the way death is treated, like the way they don't write about it, it's very, very hushed. Actually, I think keeps the shame of it alive. Because they don't write about it, and they don't write how people died. If they die by suicide, they don't write about it, and they don't mention that. It's very, very. They're trying to be but then that would keep the legacy alive. People are not very open and vocal about how it's impacted them, even though it's an epidemic.
Yeah.
And it's like so there's a death by suicide, and you can't even begin to you've got complex grief and complex trauma straight away on how many individual level, which, you know, because every person who knew them in some way, that's complex grief, complex trauma, because of the way and the manner of the death and the shock.
Yeah.
You know, so that's like, this is a mental health issue on a massive scale that I don't think we're handling well. The way suicide, so there's been a death. In England, there'll be weeks until the funeral. Here it's days.
It is days, isn't it? That always particularly troubled me.
Yes.
That I never quite liked that.
It's awful.
It's just like, quick, get them in the ground.
They're in shock. The family's in shock.
Yeah.
Absolute shock, devastation, and then they're like, I just don't understand.
It's not very conducive to a proper, you know, mourning process.
No.
And well, one of the things we're talking about today, trauma, you know, that so much of it is about kind of a frozen, usually terror, but generally it's just a strong emotion at all. Like we're talking about beforehand, we were talking about a book by Judith Herman, Trauma and Recovery. Highly recommended. Which
yes, it is actually just a really, I'm holding it, it's beautiful. She's taken a really, really difficult subject.
Yeah.
And written about it in the most accessible, the aftermath of violence from domestic abuse to political terror.
Yeah, I imagine there's a good bit about us in there, isn't there, if I remember rightly?
Yeah, but it's just,
Well, yeah, one of the things it says there is like, in animal studies, whenever an animal's in high adrenaline states, the memory imprinting is very, much more likely. And that's kind of just what trauma is. It's an imprinted memory that isn't quite digested, so to speak, integrated properly. That usually it's related to terror, feeling no safety and feeling helpless, and then feelings of disconnection from the body sometimes, as Van der Kolk talks about. We're going to get onto him.
Yes.
And from the community at large, that healing trauma, so much of it is just putting people together, isn't it? That it's
putting people I think it's about integrating the trauma into your life in a way where it's not denying it, it's definitely not getting over it, which I just really, that whole concept, it's integrating it. It's supposed to be coming to more level of acceptance in some way. Now, how you do that on an individual level is going to be completely unique for each person. So because, like, how do you
sorry.
No, go for it.
Well, to me, I think it's a totally, as you're saying, a totally holistic subject because, trauma, as far as mental illness goes, trauma's probably got the most science behind it, but the science still doesn't quite cover the whole ground, if you ask me. So there's a lot of focus on body work, and then there's a lot of, other theories would focus on emotion or meaning. EMDR, of course, talks about the brain, and I just really think it's not just any of them. It's not just any of them.
But science, why does science have the monopoly on this? It's so unique for each person. Like, can I read this quote from Walker, which is because I think that's interesting to go there. So, Pete Walker wrote Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, right?
Yes, yeah.
And he wrote that trauma occurs when attack or abandonment triggers a fight-flight response so intensely that the person cannot turn it off once the threat is over. So he becomes stuck in an adrenalized state. His sympathetic nervous system is locked on and he cannot toggle into the relaxation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Right? So that's interesting. You're talking about science, and then this is talking in a very scientific, the sympathetic, the parasympathetic, all that there. So with science and medicine and dealing with trauma and PTSD, they like the chemicals. But how the hell is that going to adequately cater for people who've gone through such an attack on the psyche?
Well, yeah, this is it. I mean, but as you're saying, it's different for everyone. So for some, actually, medication's great for PTSD.
Yes.
For some, it's a, placeholder. Like, I'm familiar with somebody in my life, really, not a client, who suffered actually kind of a horrific trauma. And she went to a GP, and the GP was luckily a good one who made a bit of time and listened. And, one of the things she told me was, it strikes me as quite beautiful, was, he just said a really simple empathic reflection, which was, he said, "Oh, I see you're crying,"
Yes.
And he cancelled an appointment and made a bit of time for her, and all he gave her was some beta blockers for a short period of time, and she managed to work through it. Like, now she's, she was never on anything after that, and that was all she needed to work through it.
But that's another interesting thing. Sorry, it's
No.
he was empathic. Wow, right? Apparently, with PTSD and complex PTSD and trauma, there's it arrests development for a while.
Oh yeah,
it can stunt your growth, your development, and empathy is one of the things that it can actually, because the world doesn't feel like a safe place. You don't feel like you can trust people. You don't. So the ability to empathize with others is significantly reduced.
Yeah.
When you're going through complex PTSD.
Herman did talk about... Sorry, I just interrupted you.
No, you didn't.
Oh, good. Herman did talk about one of the first stages of recovery being a healing relationship. You know? And like so much of that is just core conditions. And the behaviorists, who, in my opinion, are actually dominating the science of trauma quite a lot, they would actually advocate against person-centered work with somebody who's suffering from PTSD, because they think person-centered work is just getting them to retell the story, which is not.
No, it's not.
And they're saying that to retell the story just it makes them relive it. It triggers. How
is person-centered getting them to retell the story when person-centered saying we're going to go with you.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're not going to always want to tell the story. They're going to know.
Yeah.
They're going to want to gravitate towards what helps them heal.
Yeah, what's important.
Yeah, and that might not, because with clients, I don't always go to the deep pain. They don't want to go there.
So, like, it's like you're saying, there is like an emotional component that can't be ignored.
No.
Like, this is the thing about trauma is it's just it's got every benefit. It's like, it's spiritual, it's physical. That seems to be where all the focus is. It's spiritual and physical. No, physical's where all the research seems to go at the minute. Spiritual, physical, it's emotional, it's meaningful. It's I don't know. I have no other words. It's pain.
It is
pain.
It is pain. It is extraordinary emotional and mental pain. And it's like, how is taking a tablet, like, it's going to be helpful actually for managing it. Yeah. But how is it in the long term that an adequate, because whenever somebody's in pain, comfort. You comfort them.
Yeah.
You give them support, safety. You make them feel safe. You make them feel valued. You make them feel respected. How is a tablet going to do that?
Right. And, so much of it is about this, like you're saying, that frozen instinct from that quote you were talking about a second ago, that you need to feel safe enough to discharge that energy, don't you?
Yes.
What you're saying, it's a fight, flight, or freeze. It's a freeze response that's stuck, basically, isn't it?
Yes, it's basically fight. You go on. So the trauma happens, right? So let's think about this in terms of 30 years.
Okay. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
30 years, a little incident they like to call the Troubles, which is a bit of a minimizing name for what actually went on.
It's quite sweet.
Yes, the Troubles.
The bother.
The bother. So, right, 30 years. So if you're thinking about that, we lived in trauma, right? And they say that there's a development stunts when you're in traumatized state. Yeah. So most traumatic events may occur over hours. We were 30 years. Yeah. Right? So it's like the fight-flight response is triggered so intensely that the person cannot turn it off once the threat is over. So once we're 20 years later, we can try and maybe understand why we've got such high levels of complex PTSD.
Yeah, imagine never feeling safe in your own home or walking down the street.
No.
And army checkpoints everywhere.
Yes.
And, your neighbours potentially being violent. And all sorts of things like that. Like, Peter Levine, he wrote a book called Waking the Tiger, which focuses a lot on the body elements of PTSD. And it's very similar to what you're saying, that he observed in animals that, I think it was, how do you pronounce it? An impala? An impala? It's like a deer?
I don't know.
I think it's an impala, or is that just how you pronounce the car that's named after it? I don't know. We'll call it an impala for today. An impala, whenever it's like chased by a lion, they go through fight or flight as well. But the freeze response isn't just freezing. It's because all of these responses are survival oriented.
Yes.
You would imagine that freeze isn't very survival oriented, but what freeze actually is essentially playing dead. So the whole body just collapses and all the energy gets stored for a little while, and it's basically as close to dead as you can get, and basically it hopes the animal will leave it alone after that. And sometimes it does. The predator leaves, and then the impala gets back up again. And what happens next is, in the animal kingdom, there's a very natural discharge of the energy, and everything gets sort of put back into place. And Levine argues that PTSD is when that energy is still stuck and reactivated by imaginary predators or the fear of a predator, and it's still there, and the energy needs to be discharged in a certain way. So the title for that book comes from a client he had who had a traumatic tonsillectomy when she was a child, and waiting rooms, she would just completely freak out, and basically he was getting her to talk about it and to feel it again, and which sounds again like making someone relive it. But then very suddenly he see, a lot of therapists have these almost fairy tale like stories of, so I don't know how true this is, but he suddenly said to her, I can't remember her name, we'll call her Miriam, there's a tiger chasing you. And she had her eyes closed, and he said, he's chasing you up a tree, move your legs. And she sort of put her feet up and down in the ground, and simulating sort of movement, and that was the discharge of the energy, and she felt like she had quite a bit of a breakthrough after that. That's
like so that fibromyalgia is a huge thing in Northern Ireland, and
Is
I
it?
really, yeah,
I
there's a
didn't know.
lot high levels, and I think that's trauma.
I mean, it's definitely related. I would say it's the body,
Trauma,
isn't it?
like trying to release, like is trauma not being released.
Yeah.
But you were saying like movement and stuff like that. Like, I think dancing is very good. I think
Yes.
walking, exercise, all
Oh,
that,
yes.
all that stuff. And if you're going through it, like if I'm walking, whenever I'm out for my walks and say something's really annoyed me, I'll be processing while I'm walking around the forest.
The EMDR people would say that you're doing a form of EMDR with the left and right steps of your feet.
Yes.
I think that's maybe a little broad of them. I feel like that's pushing it a bit far. But that, you know, your left and right steps of the feet are stimulating the left and right sides of your brain. So when people walk, they are able to think better.
Well, I do it intuitively. So I know I go whenever I think, right, I need it now, I need to clear. So they're maybe giving me the science behind what intuitively I know to do
Your
to look
body,
after myself. And that's where the answers lie
Yes.
to all of our healing in ourselves.
I thought you were going to say in the body.
In the body, well, in ourselves. I think we have the answers to how we need to heal from trauma if we're willing to listen.
Yeah. There was there's a saying, isn't it? It's like the organ of sight is the eye, the organ of emotion is the body. There's a whole school of thought. Well, it's a bit Levine's kind of side. There's somatic experiencing is the form of therapy he practices. But there's another one called sensory motor psychotherapy. I'm finding it hard to differentiate between the two. But the person who came up with that was someone called Pat Ogden, and she discovered when working in a mental hospital that people who went to the yoga class that was on in the hospital seemed to be recovering faster.
Yoga.
That's because you're getting more in touch with your body, like dance, like you were saying.
Yes.
And I guess mindfulness meditation and body scan meditations. That, you know, in that book, The Body Keeps the Score, which I'm sure you've all heard of because it seems to be recommended every time someone breathes. But you know, they say that
I don't think everybody would have heard of it.
maybe not the layman in the street, but quite a few laymen actually, but not like, you know, not everyone, but yeah, it's very good. But
it's a good one.
you can stop feeling parts of your body whenever you're traumatized. Like there's whole bits of your body you just don't feel, and you know there's these apocryphal stories about like people going to a masseuse, and the masseuse and he touches them in this part of their shoulder and they burst into tears.
Oh.
Because it's stored, you know, it is stored. It's physical, and you know, there's whole schools of trauma-focused yoga and things like that,
and touch.
Touch, yeah.
Touch.
See, forms of therapy that would have initially been thought to be like complementary therapies or woo-woo are actually really a big part of healing from trauma. Like touch and like aromatherapy and
a good hug.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, but a lot of people they don't have hugs. They don't have that. Touch is well known to be incredibly therapeutic, but then you've got like inappropriate touch and you've got consent. It's now very loaded with different issues.
Yeah.
In a lot of our services that are caring, you're not allowed to touch. Whereas actually, particularly if you think about young children and social services and things like that, this breaks my heart because they thrive on
contact.
Contact, being cuddled or being hugged or being soothed or, you know, with the
it's containment of sorts,
it's
isn't it?
containment. It's safety.
Yeah, it is.
It's safety. It's reassurance. It's kind of like, you're okay. You're not alone.
Yeah. And it's that safety that helps facilitate someone to discharge that energy, you know?
Yes.
When you said touch, sorry, I thought you meant like energy work and like...
No, but that's one way. So
but
that might be one thing if people are struggling with that. I'd say go and get a massage.
Yeah.
Go and see somebody.
Like there is a place for Reiki and stuff like that, I think.
I love Reiki.
Yeah, like even if you don't believe in it at all though, there is good evidence for it when it comes to...
But it's just relaxing.
Trauma. Well, yeah.
Like you don't have to think too much about it. You don't have to think like, what's this doing? I go and love it. That's all I need to know.
Yeah. It's you know, the sun will rise tomorrow and science can tell you why it rises, but it's you know, a magician, a shaman will tell you that it's going to rise, you know. I don't see how the two are in conflict is what I'm trying to say.
Science. See, I was thinking about this. I was thinking about A-level physics, which I'm still healing from.
What's wrong with physics?
It just wasn't for me. I had such a lack of choices, but I had A-level physics. Well, I didn't have to, but I did it. And I hated it. Anyway, but I remember the experiments. They were like, this is science. This is going to work. They never friggin' worked. We had to doctor the results to make it because we were all like, well, it must be us.
Yeah.
It must be us. It's just like, Do you know what? Sometimes I think science. What is science? The origin of the. Is it not soul?
The scientific method?
No, science. The origin of the word science.
I don't know. No idea.
Conscience.
Conscience.
Science.
Probably
With
related.
soul, so science, and
okay.
it's it's
Didn't
like
know
a
that.
progressed. Is it like it's progressed into this fact? But then things evolve, things change, and
Yes.
science has changed.
I think as well that like science can be wrong, you
Yes.
know, which is like not me being anti-science. It's just actually that's one of the best things about it is that it admits it's wrong and it works harder.
Yes,
But you know, it's not always 100% perfect, especially when it comes to like mental health, because you know what do you use to measure that, and that tool can sometimes be falsified or wrong or affected by the littlest things. Darren Brown talked about. And like, so voting right wing and left wing. So they asked these people a series of questions and determined they're either left wing or right wing, right? And then they got the questions and reworded them, and they brought the left wing people into a room that was designed to incite disgust. So it was messy and there was dirt, and you know they said, "Sorry, we didn't get time to clean the room up before you came," and there was somebody vomited in the corner and all. And they found that the left wing people started to vote more right wing when they felt disgust. And the right-wing people started to vote more left-wing when they felt more... I can't remember what it was. I think it was safe, because so much of it is about, you know, feeling under threat. So, yeah. Like your choices are rarely your own. You're affected by a lot of things, which makes it hard to measure the impact of any sort of mental health intervention. Like, some evidence-backed interventions have done fucking nothing for me. And some that have very little evidence have done quite a lot for me, you know.
I'm always going back to the client though.
Well,
What
that's
makes you feel
important
good?
Yeah.
And this is where people are like, sometimes they'll be like, she needs to go to counselling. She needs counselling. She's not in
Fix her.
Fix her. You need to get your ass to counselling now because you're not in a good way. But then counselling's not for everybody. So it's looking at the different therapies. Like, so if you've had trauma, like people telling other people to go to counselling is something that sometimes it's nice if it's coming from a good place, but it's not if it's like, I think you're messed up, because that's not going to help anybody.
Yeah. Well, that's condemnation, you know.
Yeah, it's just judgment, it's ridicule, it's shaming.
Yeah, you don't need that.
It's just like, I'm concerned about you, and maybe you might be able to get, you know, maybe I don't know if I'm equipped to help you, but maybe you might want to go and see somebody.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of time people are trying to shame people. And go, you need this, you need that, you need to sort your life out, you know, and I'd be like, well, how do you feel about your life? And if they like, you know, people need to be using therapeutic practices that make them feel good. So if that involves dance therapy, if that involves art therapy, if that involves just blooming, you know, going traveling.
Yeah.
Traveling's a form of therapy.
Yeah, I think so. Well,
things that make you feel good.
I think like traveling could be seen as a sort of trans-theoretical form of therapy as well, because it's like if you're a CBT person, or, well, you know what, it's not even about theory. I'm saying that if you're somebody who's into challenging, you know, traveling challenges you.
Yes.
And maybe if you're someone who's more reflective, traveling encourages you to reflect. It's, you know, it's got it all.
But it's just like, you know, if you're healing from trauma, there's not just one way. It's going to be so subjective for everybody. Like, you know, and that's where I think often there's such a lack of awareness.
Yeah.
About people's mental health and how to improve it, and mental health and mental well-being. And
I think since like the coalition government, it's improved. Like, you couldn't see, like 10 years ago, could you have imagined the awareness of it that we have now? But it to me now, it's quite a surface level awareness.
Yes.
Like, you know, people go, mind your mental health, you know, talk to your friends. Like, all right, good. That's step one, you know.
Yes.
Like, now it's actually about, you know, to me, the next step should be about what, you know, what is actually helpful when talking to your friends, and like, you know, what about following the person rather than just sort of shoveling them off somewhere and saying, fix them for me. Like, do you know the amount of times people have come to me with a client and they said, he's got this and this, or he's addicted to this and this, and then I sit with the client and they go, well, I'm actually fine. Or like,
yes.
or and it's, well, and you can tell it's not denial. Or if somebody's like addicted but they're in what Prochaska calls pre-contemplative stage, which is they're not even thinking of quitting right now. And really all you can do is just sort of get them to examine it a bit, maybe plant a seed, but you're not going to get them to even start thinking of quitting in one session or 6 sessions. Like, you know, sometimes people go, just like, fix my husband, he's on this or that. And, you know, the husband sits down and they go, well, I actually really like this and that. And well, then actually the issue that you should be talking about is the relationship that you have with the person who wants you to be fixed or whatever. You know?
Who wants to control you?
Yeah. Or if you actually do have an unhealthy relationship with this or that, then to explore that as well. But it's, you know, there's a whole lot more to be looked at than just like you need to shape up, you know, to straighten up and fly right, you know.
Yeah, that has come up a lot, actually. People using counselling as a way to try and control their spouses.
Yeah.
You need to go to counselling because I want you to be better for me.
Yeah.
Actually, you should want to be better for you. And you should maybe try and, this is such a huge thing, actually. Acceptance, understand, love. This has come up. What is love, right?
Ooh. That's a big one.
Right?
Yeah.
I would say it's deep caring.
Yeah.
Deep acceptance.
That's the word that came to my mind, is acceptance.
It's acceptance and caring, right?
Yes.
I don't think we've been taught that.
No, I don't think so. This is, again, surface level stuff when we talk about love, isn't it? Like,
it's all like the peaches and cream, you know, and the flowers, and he got me a nice
adrenaline rush love, which is just crushes, really.
Yeah. And lust and love is confused too.
Yeah, like, because, you know, I think in a relationship, right, that you can sort of like have crushes, but it's the strength of a relationship that makes that crush not really like even an option in your head. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I had this friend who I had a wee crush on for like a month or two. About, when was this? About like September, I think. And I got like really bothered by it because what happened was it made my relationship a conscious choice.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Which is good though as well, because you know, you choose to be with someone every day. And usually you just sort of do that by being. But what it did was make me go, oh, well, I'm choosing to be with this person actually because I can talk to them about anything. Like I could talk to them about that crush, which to me was like the ultimate test, because that felt to me like the most untalk-aboutable thing.
This is really interesting. But do you not think you can love people, many people at the same time? And this is where
I don't know. Yeah, probably. But you would have to really indulge an infatuation to the point where you start to love someone. Do you know?
But are you thinking polygamy?
No, well, I think it's possible, but I don't think it's easy or likely, and it's probably harder, I think, than being in a relationship with one person. Did you see that Louis Theroux one about polygamy?
No.
Messy.
Yes, but that's a man 3 women, isn't it?
No,
and
it's
also,
few different ones.
Is it like how is it consensual though? Because there's a power dynamic.
Yeah, like there is. You'd have to be exactly on the exact same wavelength, and you'd have to stay in the exact same wavelength, because the wavelength changes once polygamy begins.
Yes.
It's what I gather.
It's kind of really, really weird, but
Yeah.
it's like different relationships bring out different things in different people.
Yeah.
And it's like so accepting that different, I don't know, it's just understanding that people come into your life and you'll have different relationships with different people. But we've been taught monogamy, you get married, you do this, and no matter, well, it's changed a bit. Whereas relationships come and go, they change, they evolve. And the idea is if you change and grow together with acceptance and love and deep care.
Yes.
Whereas that's not happening a lot.
No, and like just because you're in a relationship with 2 or 3 people doesn't mean that it is going to be there as well. It's just developed in a relationship with one or many people, but it doesn't magically happen by having 2 or 3 husbands or 2 or 3 wives, you know?
Yeah, this is interesting. How did we get onto this?
From
That's
trauma.
another thing about intimacy, you know, like my quotes, and there was a quote I put up and it said, you know, intimacy is not sex. Intimacy is honesty.
It
right?
is.
It's
so
being
is.
able to stand in front and bare your soul, and the person go, I'm gonna love the crap out of you anyway. But I have many people, and I've seen this over the years with friends and clients, they'll come about intimate partners, marriage and stuff like that. Now, many of them have very open, very, very healthy communication. Many, and I'm talking friends, people I've known, they'll say what the problem is. Now, I'll say, have you spoken to them about it? And they'll say no.
No, yes, exactly. Like, so, yeah, and it's because they're afraid that it won't be accepted, and maybe that's founded in some fact, which is a problem in the relationship that needs to be worked on. Like, if someone says, well, we'll go by the previous example, like, I have a crush on a coworker at work. Actually, maybe that's not that relevant, because to me that can just be let to lie. You don't really have to. Unless it really bothers you. Yeah, but if it really bothers you, I think then it's you. The best course of action is to share it with your partner. And if your partner isn't, doesn't feel secure enough when you tell them to go, oh, okay, it's obviously not a great thing to hear, but it's also, it's not really anywhere near the end of the world. Like, I think really all I needed was just sort of like, it's okay. Like, that's normal, that's fine. Whereas I think there's people who exist in relationships who don't tell their partner that, and probably for good reason, because their partner would go, well, that makes me feel horrible, and I never have a crush because I'm perfect and I don't do anything wrong. And, and to me, well, that's a problem in the relationship that sharing would bring to the surface anyway, I suppose. I guess
that's a brilliant way to deal with it. Your partner dealt with that brilliantly. Yeah.
Well, okay. I don't like to brag, but yeah. And then, well, sometimes you just let yourself have a crush and it goes away. It's like mindfulness, you notice it, you acknowledge it, and you go, okay. And then you go, to me, I have a bit more of a process where I go, do I have a crush on this person because I feel like they represent something I feel is missing in my life? In this case, no, they were just attractive. Didn't even like them as a person.
What's the lesson? What's the learning? Yeah, you were attracted to people.
Yeah, the end.
Yeah, the end.
And then, like, a week later, I felt nothing for him. Nothing, not at all remotely attracted to him at all.
Oh, that's great, though.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can have crushes. Steph takes the mickey out of me about my crushes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite.
Do you ever have a crush on a client?
No.
No, me either.
No.
Because it's not really like that, I guess. It's not that they're vulnerable. It's not that vulnerability makes someone attractive. Vulnerability makes someone very attractive, I think. But it's different, isn't it?
It is. It is so different.
Yeah.
It's just and it's just but
I can understand how it would happen, but it's never personally happened to me.
No.
And I don't think I'm not sure if a client's ever had a crush on me. Maybe if I've worked with people who are sort of young, I sometimes feel them have a little bit of a crush for one session, then the next session the same thing happens where it's just gone, because they go, well, this is not what this relationship is. But I think that's learning enough, isn't it? That not all relationships are about who you can fuck.
And this is it, because when you think about the gender stereotypes, gender roles, the relationships, you've got all that crap going on, and you have to learn all that nonsense.
Do you know what really hates me, or what I really hate at the minute, is this idea of something called the friend zone. So, the idea that there's if I know a woman and I'm just friends with her and I don't want to sleep with her, that somehow I'm weak or something, that or that it's well, you secretly want to have sex with her, and it's well, yeah, I secretly want to have sex with everyone. It doesn't mean that I actually it doesn't mean that I'm pretending to pursue this person by being their friend. Maybe I actually just want to be their friend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just hate it so much that yeah, I had this friend years ago who said they'd put me in the friend zone. I was I was never interested in you. You don't.
It's a bit presumptuous.
Yeah, and it's creating a power dynamic that doesn't exist.
But it's also playing into that that's the main reason that we should be in each other's lives, men and women, if we're going to either.
Yeah, it's evolutionary biology. I hate. I probably whinged about this before, but evolutionary biology is used, or evolutionary psychology is used all the time to justify people being fucking stupid. They go, I like to people here I like to play a fiddle because I'm just trying to make sure my genetic seed or whatever gets out. I'm just doing caveman stuff, and it's well, you're not a fucking caveman, cavemen were Kevin.
I've got an image of a person.
Oh, Kevin, you're
not a caveman, Kevin.
Oh no, yeah. And it's that was 6 million years ago. I don't care if there's a basis that in the past hundreds of years, like you see yourself as an alpha male or something. It's like that's baby shit, man. That's like that's I don't care if there's a precedent for that. You are not that. You're an adult in the year 2019.
But he's got issues with women.
Well, probably. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's like Kevin. I
Issues with
feel bad.
himself, maybe.
Kevin,
Yeah.
we need to talk about your deeply ingrained female issues. You know, there's a misogyny there.
Yeah.
There's a lack of understanding, and I would argue there's a fear of women.
I
So he
would
wants to dominate.
I would even say it's like a invented hierarchical thing. Like so there's do you know about Jordan Peterson and all that? There's about there's one good fact around a framework of bullshit designed to support really conservative beliefs. He's a
I know Jordan. I actually quite like some of his things.
Bits of
I
it.
do.
Bits of it. This is what I'm saying. There's usually like a good bit surrounded by like some complete bullshit, or him maybe. I feel like he's purposely saying what someone else is saying for them, if you know what I mean. So he's saying like, Carl Jung said this, and what he meant by it was this, and it's like, why do you think he meant that? You know?
Yeah, but are we not all just interpreting?
No. Well, I guess so.
Is he not helping a lot? Is he not like a voice for a lot of disenfranchised young men?
I think what he's doing is there's like good bits there, which he's saying that like responsibility is kind of cool. Like, you know, taking care of yourself and making yourself a better person, and it's sort of tying into a metaphor of movement that people enjoy. Like there's NLP people talk about metaphors of movement, that the way you talk about therapy can make it more appealing to people. So you maybe use a metaphor of unclogging a pipe and letting water flow naturally.
Yes.
And I find Reiki people use a lot of metaphors of movement, and I think that's really what gets people in and sells it. And I feel like he does that with being an adult and not being a man-child and looking after yourself and all that stuff.
I saw something he did recently, transcending and feeling that and learning that life is meaningful.
Yeah, and well, he would follow that whole Viktor Frankl school of if you just pursue what makes you happy, that's just hedonism. Pursue what is meaningful instead, happiness follows.
Oh,
but you know, and that's like the thing is that book 12 Rules for Life. There's quite a lot of it. You're like not going to dispute. Like, yeah, of course, stand taller. Like, of course, pet a cat when you see it, and of course, let kids be kids. But then, you know, what follows from that is things like, you know, stand taller because life is a hierarchy and you want to be the best mate for women, and you know, like basically just evolutionary psychology. Because it says that's the rule number one of that 12 Rules for Life thing, which is, you know, of course, stand tall, because like we're talking about the body, so much of mental health is about how you carry yourself in the body and posture. And he would compare it to lobsters, that lobsters have similar brain chemistry to us because they respond the same way to antidepressants. And when you give a lobster antidepressants, their posture changes and they move up higher on the sort of dominance hierarchy of lobsters. And he argues that hierarchies are just a natural part of life that should be. Like, to mess with them is to mess with the very fabric of life itself, he says. And that's where I just don't agree, because I feel like your hierarchy is it's a structure that's made up by people, and you're placed in a hierarchy beyond official structures such as maybe workplaces. But even then, like it's defined by you. Like,
yes, that's exactly it. How can you but I'm not competing with anybody. What hierarchy am I in?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand.
Right.
Like, if they're like, you failed them, like, that's fine. I'm over here. You've actually nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you measure success or failure within that system? It's only if you're in a system and you're trying to get to the top that you can measure that. But if you're just trying to live a good life, and you're not even bothered, like, I'm not competing.
Yeah.
I hope we all win.
Yeah.
I'm away here doing my own thing.
Like,
I'm walking in the woods.
Competitiveness doesn't necessarily, and introducing and creating competitiveness just doesn't always work. And oh man, I've probably
hierarchy, like, it just wreck it.
How can someone win if winning means that someone loses? Do you ever hear
Oh,
that?
we've done
Scatman
that.
John, have I done that before?
Oh yeah, we have.
I just love that.
You did a
Yeah.
Awesome. And there was some.
I can feel the backlash of choosing Scatman John over a clinical psychologist with a worldwide following, but We
Jordan
need listeners for a
Do
backlash.
you know what? I just love the fact that they're like Russell Brand, Jordan Peterson, like different ones like that. They're getting out there and they're talking about these emotions,
Yes.
these issues, and they do. The only thing with Jordan Peterson on Facebook is his followers are militant, so they are a bit. So he might write something that's like a bit like this journalist, like it's just vague. But his followers will support him no matter what.
Newman,
so they just like take them on. Like it's kind of like they gang up a bit too much. That would be the only thing. So you can't really have an open dialogue.
He's got a big blind spot there too. I don't think he really acknowledges it or deals with it enough. It's kind of like Corbyn and anti-Semitism as well. Like I feel like I don't think Corbyn's an anti-Semite, but I feel like he sort of lets people be anti-Semite around him a bit too much.
That's the only thing, because I actually really like his message, but I do think his followers possibly bully and intimidate people who are trying to have dialogue.
Yeah. Like, and I feel like there's like if you look at the Peterson sort of fan base, there's quite a lot of people who are exactly who he wants to be speaking to, who are sort of taking responsibility for their own lives and getting better. It's just implicit in the message of taking responsibility for your own lives and improving yourself is sometimes that conservative message of you don't need the state to help you, so fucking tax cuts for the big banks or whatever, but this is it. Like, it's true that you should take responsibility for your own life and do your best to improve and do all these incremental behavioral steps to get better, but to do so doesn't mean that there's not people out there who deserve help or a living wage or social housing. Like when you tell people to help themselves, sometimes there's an implicit message of people who aren't doing well aren't helping themselves enough, and that's nonsense.
That is, but I wanted to. I suppose it's about compassion, empathy. It's about empowering people, but also that doesn't necessarily mean you don't get help from, like, you're not on benefits or stuff like that. You can be an empowered person on benefits.
Of course you can.
Of course you can. Even though the benefit system's disgraceful.
Well, the PIP's a mess, isn't it?
But I mean, you can be empowered, and you can be empowered in most areas of your life, I think. But it is a mindset.
Yeah.
It's about taking. This is where I wanted to talk about this here too. This is one quote that I thought was really good in terms of trauma. So, no matter how deep the issue is, no matter how long you have struggled with it, the possibility exists for you to become absolutely free, whole, and healed.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
The possibility exists.
The possibility exists no matter how deep the issue is and no matter how long you have struggled with it. The possibility exists for you to become absolutely free, whole, and healed. And that's when we were talking about integration. And I think the Pete Walker book, Complex PTSD, Surviving to Thriving.
Yeah.
And that's where, how do you thrive after an event like that? And I think it's when you integrate it and you try and make sure people never go through it again.
Yeah.
That's when I think, that's when I've seen people really thrive. I say they come out of the fire carrying buckets. So they come out of the fire carrying buckets of water, and they use their pain to help others. And that's where I think there's a lot of growth can come. If you stay in survival, you're staying in the pain, and the pain probably never completely go, but how can you make it meaningful? I think is doing the work for others so they don't suffer.
Yeah, to defend or to be part of a community, I suppose. I guess that's another thing Peterson's doing to people, is he's creating a sort of community. And so much we're talking about trauma and recovery is about connection, like first to the body and to the emotions and to meaningfulness of an experience, but also to connect with like other people. Like in that Van der Kolk book, he would talk sometimes about joining like choirs as well as like the whole yoga and dance group thing, to sort of when you connect with people in rhythm, there's parts of your brain that light up. That's the polyvagal system. About feeling connected to people. It's all about recovery. So it would be the vagus nerve that activates when you're in a sort of group of like-minded people and socializing or singing together or connecting.
Oh,
in some
choirs
shape or
are
form.
brilliant for mental health. And
I'm quite keen on what you said as well about like making sure something like that doesn't happen again.
yeah.
Like, because one of the other things he would talk about is joining like a self-defense class, which also would connect you to your body again. But there's some of the things he recommends is actually like reenacting a traumatic incident, but with your new self-defense skills, which to me sounds incredibly volatile, but probably does something, you know. Like, one of the things we didn't get to cover today was about how people who are traumatized sometimes put themselves into situations where it looks likely to happen again.
Oh.
And Freud thought it was the death instinct or something.
Or it's kind of like waiting for they want the happy ending.
Yeah, to complete it. And there's real mixed opinions on what that means, because some would see it as a flawed attempt at healing, like you're saying, the happy ending. And some would say even if they got it, that happy ending, it doesn't actually end the trauma. Some would say that's exactly what happens. I'd
say it's just mixed. Part of their healing journey,
yeah.
where they learn actually this doesn't work.
Yeah.
I thought this might cancel out that.
Yeah.
It hasn't. So then the healing journey continues.
Yeah.
And they've learned that didn't work.
Yeah.
So they had to make that mistake, or they had to learn it their way. So it's trying to think of things as opposed to mistakes, learning.
Yeah. Well, it's the growth mindset again, isn't it?
Well, I have had to adopt that.
What time are we on?
We're on an hour. So
should we do a dilemma?
I did. Well, yes, do a dilemma. No, I was just thinking we'd had that little preamble before, so I don't think that was that long, before we pressed.
Oh, yeah, so we're actually okay then.
I think so.
Yes, dear listener, we were talking last time about how instead of interpreting a dream at the end of a session at the end of a podcast, we were going to do an ethical counselling dilemma. So this one's actually from the Pages of Therapy Today, which is a magazine that gets forcibly put through your letterbox if you're signed up with the BACP once a month. But they used to have a monthly dilemma, which is great. So this one's about safeguarding concerns. So you're a counsellor at a school. A teacher has recommended a student to you because his grades are starting to fall and his mood is starting to plummet. In the session, this student asks about confidentiality and says he's afraid of his parents knowing anything is wrong because he's not told them about his mock exam results yet and is anxious his father will be angry and will punish him. He alludes to his father having very high expectations and a violent temper. He also says that sometimes he feels under such pressure that life isn't worth living. So, you're in a sort of torn situation. Do you tell the sort of college safeguarding lead about this potential suicidal ideation, and potentially violate his trust since he's asked about confidentiality? Or would his needs be better met by saying nothing at this point in the hope that he will engage with further sessions? Yeah, and there's a fear, of course, that if you contact the safeguarding people, they'll tell his parents, and the situation might get worse. Yeah, it's when we talked about it earlier, we didn't really have too much of a struggle with it, did we?
No,
I wouldn't tell safeguarding.
No, God, no.
I don't like. I think there's a difference between because they've just alluded to like quite a low level of suicidal ideation, which is sometimes I thought about my life not being worth living. Next is I want to commit suicide. Sorry, I want to die by suicide. The next one is I have a plan to die by suicide. And then the last stage is I have like a date and a time, And to me, that's like just that first level, which is that he's thought about it. And I feel like if you told safeguarding, first of all, there's the risk of parents finding out. Second of all, it's been the first session. He's already been concerned about confidentiality. And now you're like, you've explained it. Even though you've explained it to him, you're still in a way breaking his trust by going, okay, you've said one concerning thing and I'm telling on you.
Yes.
And then he wouldn't come back for another session. He wouldn't be interested in counselling as a whole, probably. And then where's that leave him? Same place?
Well, I wouldn't be telling safeguarding the school at all, right?
Yeah.
But this has come up for me a few times with clients.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, mock results.
Ah, right, okay. So it's a wider issue, you would say?
Yes. They often mark them down to push them harder to do better in the real things.
I heard some bullshit yesterday about how there's talk of like testing 4-year-olds now.
Jesus, like I can't even.
Seriously?
So with that,
you think they need more?
But they've been tested. They're tested. They're the most stressed generation ever. Everybody's blaming iPhones and nobody's looking at the bigger picture. That is a classic example. The school's putting too much pressure. The child is stressed all hell. He's completely immersed in a stressful environment. Yep. He doesn't know what to do. They've possibly put his marks down to push him harder to get better in the real things, which is classic. They've been doing that for decades. Yes, they do.
Wow. I don't
know. They do that for decades. Oh, right. You know what I feel about the education system?
Oh, yeah.
Dodgy. So they will mark them down and they will push them to get higher grades because that's what they do. And I've had clients with exactly the same. That's like I've had this.
Such shit.
And I've been like this. Don't listen to them. Life's more important. If you don't get the grades, it'll be all right. And you are more important than any exam result that's ever happened. You are more important than any exam. Yeah. This is really not worth you feeling like this about.
Yeah.
And what would you like me to do?
Yeah, you are not your exam results.
You are not your exam results. But they're not told that. So they're immersed in a highly stressed environment. They're being tested. The results are coming down because they're pushing for the results to make the schools look good at the expense of the mental health and well-being of the children.
Yes. I think in a situation...
Why would you tell the safeguarding team? Because they don't care.
Well, this is another thing as well. It's like, you tell the safeguarding team... End result is like they get him like more counselling, another counsellor,
or just this is life. You have to. This is what happens. Can you not cope with the stress? Yeah. And then making him,
and then they put him straight back in.
The burden's on him again.
A bit of shame on top of it as well. Like
I'm like, this is all a load of nonsense. Do your best, see what happens. It is not worth this. Did I tell you about my friend? Well, the person I went to school with, who got the best. She is a teacher, actually. It's quite a small high school. Met her a few months ago. We were talking about the education system, and she said to me that she was ill the entire way through high school, but she got the best. Yes, stress. Because she pushed herself so much, and she got one of the best. I think she got the best A-level results in a subject in Northern Ireland, right? So when I met her, she's happy now, and she's saying like she's got a balance, as in mental health and all that there. But she said she was very mentally unwell when she was at school because she was so stressed. She was never out of her books, and she was just push. And looking back and reflecting now, so we're both 40. She said, "I wish there'd been more balance. I wish I'd had more balance. I wish I hadn't taken it so seriously because most of her teenage years were just spent stressed."
Yeah, and this is it. Like as well, like it's shame is used as a motivator and guilt is used as a motivator rather than compassion. And you see that in so many people as well. I feel like there's the whole generation before us completely was
course of education.
There's somebody I know who would teach adults with learning difficulties, and she wouldn't even entertain the thought of shaming them or guilting them into doing something at all. They would say, always try and get them to do things, for themselves so that they can feel proud and feel happy. And then in the same sentence, she would say, and I don't want to do a shitty job of it. And it's like, do you not see the double standard you're holding yourself to, that you motivate yourself with shame and motivate them with compassion, like it's... it's a tough one.
Well, just before we
wait, I've got a devil's advocate for the dilemma, because I thought of it a second ago, because I thought it's not such a dilemma if we both agree. He's alluding to a potentially abusive home. He's not outright said it, but maybe safeguarding could need him for him to keep him safe from his father if he's violent. But then he's not really told us anything yet.
That's exactly it. He's not talking about it. If he's not talking about it, you can't. And then if you start going, it's your father, like, how's that? It's just like, he hasn't said that. You can only really go on what they're bringing in to the session. Because sometimes the things that they get in touch with you about are actually not the things. So you've got to let it flow. Got to go with the client. But he's not talking about that. That could be the case, but that's not what you can't be thinking about that because it's not in the room.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Well, oh yeah, I know. My devil's advocate is pretty weak, to be honest. He's a straw man. He's a straw devil.
The fence sitter, and we've whacked them off the fence. What was I going to say? You know what you said about compassionate training or compassionate educating, right? This might not. But all I thought of was Juno. You know our dog. Juno.
Oh yeah.
And whenever we got Juno, she's a hound, and it was like trying to train her to get into the car at the end of a walk, and actually train her because the hounds take off when they get sense. And a lot of time people with dogs would train in quite an aggressive, like forthright, dominate the dog manner. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do that. I don't want to treat her like that. I can't. How am I going to get this dog in the car? Because she didn't get into the car at the end of walk. Like, she wouldn't do it. Because she didn't want to go home. She's just and they're very stubborn.
Yeah.
They're hilarious, actually.
Yeah.
She'd just look at me, like probably about 15 meters away. And I'd be like, can you get in the car? Get in the car. Get in the car, like this. And she'd just be like, no. And then I'd go closer and she'd just bolt. But she'd run round in big circles, but she wouldn't get into the car. So I was like, right, how am I going to do this? With love. I trained her to get in the car with treats, with complete compassion, and I just love the dog out of her. And she now gets into the car really quickly. For a hound, that's really, really good.
Really good, yeah.
But I decided, right, how can I do this? Can I train this dog in a really loving, compassionate way? And I could.
Ah, good. Well, would you say the same applies to parenting?
Well, unconditional positive, yes.
Yeah.
I say it would apply if you treat people really, really well, and animals and stuff. They're gonna love the dung out of you, and that's where, like, with clients, with the work I do in schools, I know whenever I give that level of respect and that kindness, it all comes back.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, there you go.
It's a good note to end on.
Yeah, so I don't even know.
Dog.
How did we trauma? What was it? Trauma, intimacy, dog training.
We came back and forth to the trauma, but I feel like it was the thread that linked it all.
Yeah. So anyway,
yes.
do you want to do the wee
jingle?
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I'm preparing myself.
I forgot about my coffee. Right, okay.
Therapy Geeks.
Thanks for listening to Therapy Geeks. Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Deezer, Listen Notes, Stitcher, Podcast Index, and Buzzsprout. Give us a like or a follow or a subscription, whatever your podcast app allows. Thanks for listening.